The world turns, and with each turn, a change. And each change makes it more complex, unpredictable, enigmatic. The world keeps turning. And from the Pellicer and Heredia practice, we anticipate everything that is going to happen. Brexit, artificial intelligence, new commercial borders, legal tech. The world keeps turning, and it commands the reliance on international lawyers who are capable of interpreting this new reality with integrity, honesty, and transparency, offering answers to so many new questions. Whatever it is, ask us. At Pellicer and Heredia, we know how.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to the webinar about property taxes and taxes implication if you're buying or selling a property in Spain as a resident or as a non-resident. Now, I have the pleasure to have here on the north part of Costa Blanca, actually, I think it's from Javier. Pedro, can you hear us? Yes?
Yeah, I can hear you, I can see you very well. Thank you for inviting Ignacio. Hello, everyone.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much. I am today in one of the offices in the Alicante province, and on the other side of Spain, southeast actually, we've got Michael Davies. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Ignacio. Hello, Pedro. Nice to see you all.
Hello, Michael.
Yeah. Thank you very much for joining us today. Actually, I would like to comment that today has been a very, very popular subject. We have a lot of people register, and I'm afraid I'm not sure if people will be able to see it later on because we are fully booked. But anyone who's not able to do it, could watch it on the website through Facebook or Michael's chat, Pedro's, etc., etc. So now, going back to the subject that a lot of people buying a property in Spain, they are concerned. And I know Michael said about the typical case of people coming over from the UK, clients coming over here and asking questions. So we thought that today we could cover a journey from clients coming over from abroad, from countries abroad, and deciding to buy a property in Spain and all the property taxes related. Okay, so we're going to start talking about a subject which John and Mary decide to buy a property in Spain in a region, and we're going to try to compare. Michael will start talking about the south, and Pedro will be talking about the north of Spain. Okay, so let's start about talking about what is the first tax we're going to face if we decide to buy a property in Spain. Okay, over to you, Michael, from south. Yes.
Hello, Ignacio. Okay, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Michael Davies. I'm a Spanish lawyer. The name of my firm is Davies, Abogados, Solicitors and Barristers, and we operate just in the Andalucía area. For those of you that don't know, Ignacio and Pedro, they're in the Valencia region. We're in Andalucía. So Andalucía, basically Marbella, Costa del Sol, Almería, Seville. That's the area of Spain that we operate in. Okay, so the reason why Ignacio has organized, and I'm very grateful, various firms to speak today, is that in Andalucía, the taxes aren't always the same as in the Valencia region. So it's good that we have these two sort of perspectives. So regarding Andalucía, I imagine the first instance, we'll talk about the taxes that come to mind on the initial purchase. So on the initial purchase, in Andalucía at the moment, if you buy a second-hand property, the main tax is the transfer tax. The transfer tax at the moment in Andalucía is 7% across the board. In other words, there's no sliding scale regarding, depending on the price of the property, it's 7%. So basically, it's fair to say that if you buy a property in Andalucía, all the taxes and fees will come to about 10% on a second-hand property, because you've basically got the transfer tax, the 7%, you've got a notary fee, a registrar fee, and a solicitor's fee, and a couple of other smaller items like the NIE numbers and for the wills, etc. Basically around 10%. If you buy a second-hand property, then instead of it being subject to transfer tax at 7%, instead you will have VAT at 10% plus document tax at 1.2%. So that's the basic, if you like, taxes related to the actual purchase. Is that what you want, Ignacio, at the moment? Just
yes. Let's start with buying a property in Spain, Michael. And let's say we start buying in Andalusia, so you cover that area.
Yes.
Any other property you should mention here before we jump into the Costa Blanca?
No, as far as the purchase, basically, if you buy a second-hand property, the tax is transfer tax 7%. If you buy a new property, you pay VAT at 10% plus document tax at 1.2. So basically, we always say, if you buy a second-hand property in Andalusia, think around the 10% market, 10% sort of approximation for all taxes and fees. If you buy a new property, then basically we were talking about instead of being 10%, you'd go to about let me say 3, 4, you'd be more in the region of 13-14% if you buy a new property. That's good. That's right.
Pedro, how about if clients decide, instead of going to Andalusia, going to Costa Blanca, what property tax are they facing if they're buying a property off plan or second hand resale? Pedro, over to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Ignacio. I mean, obviously, we are based, and what we will speak is about Valencia region. We call it in Spanish Comunidad Valenciana, which is one of the regions. It belongs Costa Blanca. Costa Blanca is the province of Alicante in most ways, and also covers Comunidad Valenciana, also the region of Valencia, the province of Valencia, and also the province of Castellón. So this is a particular area that, or with Andalusia, is one of the most popular areas that international investors, international people that wants to come to Spain, this Andalusia and Valencia region are the most popular areas. Having said that, and just to be simple and summarize, when someone wants to buy a property, obviously we will be able to speak about if someone wants to invest for rent, or if it's better to do it individually or maybe a company. Or we will talk about property tax, also as a council tax, Plusvalia tax, maybe about inheritance tax, maybe about wealth tax. There are some different situations where at the end the property value comes out in order to check. Ignacio, also before I forget, also we may speak about the new concept about the value of properties that we have in all Spain, about valor de referencia, the reference value that now is giving us, it looks like it was approved in order to avoid litigations or conflicts, and maybe it's going to happen more and more. If we have time,
Pedro,
let's talk about that.
Before you even move to that subject,
so
let's go to property.
So on property, I mean, when someone wants to buy a property in Valencia region for resale properties like second-hand property, it's 10%. It's 10% fixed. So everyone who wants to buy a resale property, think about with the 10% tax plus notary registry and solicitor fees, lawyer fees, think about between 11.5 and 12.5% of that value. And when it's a new property, the new property is exactly the same value tax as Andalusia. In all Spain is 10%. And plus 1.5% of stamp tax. Instead of Andalusia, I think Michael said 1.2. In Valencia region is 1.5. It's 10 plus 1.5. So between the taxes, value tax plus the stamp tax plus notary registry fees and lawyers will be around 13.5, around 13.5%.
Okay, that's very good, Pedro. Thank you for that. Then now we're going to go back to, okay, let's say I'm deciding here to buy a property in Spain, whether it's Andalusia or Costa Blanca, and then I've been told that I need to pay Plusvalia. Michael, could you please tell us about Plusvalia in Andalusia, and later on Pedro could tell us a little bit about that. Over to you, Michael.
Okay, so regarding Plusvalia tax, we've heard this before as well. If you buy a property in Spain and somebody tries to make you as the buyer to pay the Plusvalia tax, you just shouldn't accept it. The Plusvalia tax is a tax, it's like a local capital gains tax. It is legally possible to make it, to sign on the contract that it has to be paid by the buyer. But if nothing is said, it's a tax that is due by the seller. And a buyer should never accept to pay the Plusvalia tax. So this is a tax that basically we can talk about later, but really when we're talking about the seller's tax obligations. As far as the buyer, they should simply not accept paying the Plusvalia tax if they buy a property in Spain. That's what we think anyway.
Okay. Pedro, what will you think? What would you like to say about Plusvalia?
Yeah,
tax
well, about
to buyers. Yeah,
Plusvalia, at the end of Plusvalia,
reference.
the Plusvalia, obviously, the word, it means like a gain. Gain is a gain that is a local tax, as you said by Michael, and is due to be paid by the seller. So I agree with Michael that don't accept to pay the gain instead of if you are a buyer, but because it's something that needs to be paid by the seller. I mean, about the Plusvalia tax has been a lot of, I would say, conflict. There's been resolutions by the Constitutional Court. I think it was, 2017 was the first one. We had another one in 2019 in order to avoid this kind of tax, or just to avoid some clauses about some articles about this specific tax. And in 2021, at the end of 2021 of last year, in October, we had another resolution. In November, it was approved, like an EU rules about this Plusvalia. And I think it was in November, 10th of November, I don't remember what, I think it was that time when it was approved and also published also the resolution, the latest resolution that we have in the Constitutional Court. What has been a lot of conflict, it means that at the end, I recommend to all the clients, in order to, is going to sell a property, is going to pay this tax, to check perfectly if it needs to be paid or not. Right now, many municipalities, as this is local tax, are revising this local tax according to the parameters that they can do it. But I would suggest, just to check, because some of them sometimes is high. I'm talking about thousands of euros sometimes. So it's something that as a seller, you need to check whether you have to pay that amount, whether it needs to be revised, or maybe you don't have to pay any amount. So it's something that's important to check by the seller.
Right, let me just add you here just a bit of advice. It's about Plusvalia, as Pedro stated. I think the 26th of October, the Constitutional Tribunal just changed the reference of what is called Plusvalia. We did enclose here an article for you to read in the chat, just in case it might bring you some light about what it is. But my advice here will be always to declare the Plusvalia, because in some cases, the Constitutional Court stated here that if you made a loss, you shouldn't pay Plusvalia, right? But the problem is, if you just don't do the sales declaration, the town hall will not know about whether you made a gain or not. And that could be very, very delicate, because you could end up paying the reference value and the sliding scale on the Plusvalia because they don't even know you made a loss. You know, we've been dealing with some cases of that, and we highly recommend, obviously, to declare that Plusvalia when you make a loss. I don't know if Michael had some experience about it or not, but we did face some of them, Michael.
Yeah, Ignacio, I just wanted, I think at the moment, I think we're talking about the buyer's expenses. So I think from the buyer's perspective, with the Plusvalia tax, it's simple as the buyer should not accept to pay Plusvalia tax because it's not a tax that belongs to them. But having said that, what I will say is that if you are buying from a non-resident, it's important that your solicitor, even though it's an obligation of the seller, that he finds out what the Plusvalia tax is and retains it. Because in Spain, by law, if you are buying from a non-resident owner, from somebody else that's a non-resident, if you buy and you don't retain the money that he has to pay for the Plusvalia tax, then you would be responsible. So from a buyer's perspective, don't accept paying the Plusvalia tax. And if you're buying from a non-resident, your solicitor needs to retain that money to make sure that it's paid, because otherwise they'd be responsible. But in any case, something that the solicitor will take care of. But if you like, maybe later, if you like, when we talk about the seller's expenses, we can talk about the sentence and all these things.
Fine. Yes. Yeah. Okay, let's move on then. Then we managed to buy a property in Spain. Okay. and then you've got already the property registered in your name. What about non-resident tax in Andalusia, Michael, and in Costa Blanca? How does it work? Over to you.
Okay, so basically, as far as taxes, once you've purchased your property, you've got two options. You become a resident or you remain a non-resident. So if you remain a non-resident, which is like 80% of the situation, people that have a holiday home, basically, by the time you finish the purchase, your solicitor will have set up electricity, water, rates, rubbish, and community of owners by direct debit. He will have organised wills for you, and he will tell you that apart from those things, there's only one extra thing that you have to do every year, which is file the non-resident imputed income tax. The way they calculate that in Andalusia, I'm not sure if it's exactly the same up in Valencia region, is that they consider that your imputed income is 1.1% of the catastral value of the property, which appears on your rates bill and is normally a little lower than the market value. And then you tax at 24.75% of that. As a rule of thumb, I'd say if you're buying a 2-bedroom flat worth €250,000, you'll probably end up paying between the accountant or the solicitor does the return and the tax each year, you'll probably end up paying maybe €500, €600 a year. If you have a large villa, you may end up paying €700 in total. That is as a non-resident. If you are a resident, then obviously your tax obligations are much more complex. I don't think I can really explain that in a few minutes now. But for a non-resident, just everything by direct debit that your lawyer will organise when you purchase, and then the imputed income tax that we've just mentioned as a non-resident.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Pedro, how about non-resident tax in Costa Blanca? Over to you.
Well, yeah, at the end, the non-resident taxes obviously it comes into the same situation as Michael has said. In general, the percentage rate is covers 24% in this case, about the 1.1 about the catastral value. But there are some special situations when someone has an income, for example, on rental, but just having a property, just owning a property, for example, someone which is owning a property because he's applying for golden visa, but is non-resident and is not tax resident in Spain, will be not considered as a non-resident for tax purposes. So we have to pay just because owning the property, even though she doesn't have any income at all. You will have to pay some. It's a small tax normally, a very small tax, but it's something that needs to be declared. The declaration of this tax is a year after. For example, in 2022, where we are right now, you have to declare as non-resident tax the year 2021. Okay. And this is in general is what has been said by Michael, all the calculation. Yeah, that's perfect.
Right, thank you.
Sorry, nothing. Yeah. I forgot also. So yes, so as Pedro says, and that's a good point because I forgot about it. Obviously, as a non-resident, if you do rent it out, then there's a slight more complexity. Okay, but again, it's a bit difficult to explain in this webinar. That's so sort of general. The other thing that I did want to mention is that in Andalusia, as a non-resident, you also would have to pay wealth tax if you have assets in Spain worth more than €700,000. Having said that, wealth tax is actually a very, very small amount, so it's not something that really should concern most people, unless we're talking about really, really high amounts. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Pedro, would you like to comment in case we decide to rent out a property as a non-resident in Costa Blanca, as Michael stated? Would you like to mention something? What is the quarterly? What they need to do to comply with the tax?
Yeah.
Would you like to just briefly mention?
That's a non-resident because things change. I mean, if you are residing in Spain, a foreigner living in Spain, residing in Spain, and having a property in Spain or outside Spain, or if you are not resident in Spain, but you have a property in Spain and you want to rent it. If you are a non-resident that has bought a property in Spain and you are not European Union citizen, the percentage of taxes to be charged into your income that you're going to get in gross will be 24%. And the worst part is that you will not be able to include the costs, maintenance or any cost about the property, you will not be able to include it. If you are a European Union citizen, that change. You will be able to include some costs and you will be able to, the net amount you will be paying 19%. If you are resident in Spain, and you have a property outside Spain, or you have a property in Spain, and you are renting, obviously it's not your habitual home, it's a property that you are renting, and it's a long-term contract, for example, that's a good and a big benefit. It's a long-term contract. At the end, we have an income about every month, every year that you get an income, and you will be able to reduce the cost of maintenance accordingly to the days that you are renting the property. And once you have that base, so income minus costs, then you will be able to reduce also that base into 60%. So will be just charged 40%. Obviously, always about the days that you are renting it. Normally, if it's a long term, it's 365 days. And the latest thing that we need to do in the latest years, we are including also the name of a tenant and the NI number or DNIs, which is Spanish, if it's Spanish. So if you are resident in Spain, you have benefits. If you are also non-resident but European Union citizen, you also have benefits. Instead that you have to pay 19% of the net amount. But if you are not European Union not resident in the European Union, then things change and will be 24%, and you will not be able to include costs.
Right. So it's good, Pedro. So you, as a non-resident, there is a distinction between non-European and European, the tax to be paid and the expenses to be deducted.
Yeah.
And as a resident, you've got two types of contract. You've got the touristic apartments that it is like a business. You have income minus expenses, but that's the net amount is fully taxed, correct?
Exactly. The net amount is fully taxed, obviously, and you will have to, you will have to declare that every 3 months. You have to make a declaration and pay accordingly. And so you need to have an accountant and a tax advisor in order to do that for you every 3 months and every year at the end. It's important. At the end, obviously, if you're gonna, long-term contracts has this deduction, or this, we call it both deduction or reductions on
an allowance,
on the base, and 60% is a lot. But obviously, if you are a resident, but you have a property, for example, a property in the UK. We have many clients that have properties in UK that are being rented. Well, as resident in Spain, they get benefits in order to include, this is the income, this is the costs of solicitor, this is the community fees, this is the plumber because of maintenance, something has broken, or the interest of the mortgage. For example, we always recommend clients that are becoming resident that want, maybe they want to invest in another property, but why not buy it with a mortgage with interest, which can be reduced as a cost. Depreciation of a property can be included, 3%. We can include the costs of a furniture during the following 10 years. There are some benefits on attractions in order to rent properties. Obviously, when it's long-term, it's going to be a lot better because it's going to be a reduction of 60% of the base to be taxed, which is absolutely good.
So Pedro, basically 60% will be exempt and only the taxable amount will be 40%. So it's a sliding scale
of the net amount.
So 40% of the net amount is taxable according to the sliding scale that you have on your personal income tax return, right? Okay, right. Now, different things here, Pedro. Obviously, we're talking about resident and non-resident, and that's the obligations to do. I presume if you have a good question for you, Pedro, if you have a property in Spain, do you need to declare it on 720 or not?
No, 720 is a modelo that is an informative declaration done when you are, and you have to do it when you are resident in Spain and you are tax resident in Spain. For those who became, for example, last year residents in Spain, if they were more than 183 days in Spain last year in 2021, this year they should have done in January, February, or March a Modelo 720, which is an informative declaration. Informative declaration, there are 3 pillars that needs to be informed. One pillar is property. If the property, when it was acquired, the value of the property was more than 50,000 euros, or properties. And the other one is investment funds, and then for example, a bond, an ISA, any investment that is valued more than 50,000 euros, or altogether more than 50,000 euros, or even if it's jointly between you and the spouse, more than 50,000 euros. And then it's insurance or value of insurance, life insurance, for example, if it's more than, or shares more than 50,000 euros also. Bank accounts. The third pillar is bank accounts. If it's all of them is more than 50,000 euros. If that is the case, you need to declare those assets which are outside Spain, not in the territory of Spain. If it's a property in Spain or any bank account or any value, any asset which is in the territory of Spain, do not have to be included in the model 720. But obviously what Michael have said, if someone is non-resident in Spain but has a property of, let's say, 1 million euros, if he's just owned by one person, I mean, the allowance is 700,000 euros. So from the rest amount, 300,000 euros will have to be paying as a base wealth tax. But his own individually, is bought by a marriage, a couple, which is each one of them is 500,000 euros each one, will not have to be paying wealth tax in that case. There are some difference also about wealth tax in
let's go for it.
In Spain, in Andalusia, and also in Valencia. That's right.
Right. Let's talk about, well, let me just send a reminder to those who are listening. If they're a tax resident, they're still on time to do their tax return as a resident from April until the end of June. Okay, that's important for them to know, because now is due for you to do and speak to your lawyer and your accountant to do your tax return. Right. Now, you said, Pedro, about wealth tax, and Michael did cover wealth tax. Michael, could you please refer in Andalusia, wealth tax as a non-resident and wealth tax as a resident? And then we'll jump into Costa Blanca. Over to you, Michael.
Okay, so as a non-resident, basically anything that you own in Andalusia as a resident above 700,000 euro, you'll pay inheritance tax. If you are a resident, then you have to declare not only what you have in Spain, but also worldwide, but with the benefit that you are allowed to deduct, because the house in Spain will be your main home, 300,000 euro of its value does not count towards the 700,000 euro threshold. So if you're a non-resident, if your asset in Spain is worth more than 700,000, remember if it's in joint names, it only assign half to each. So if your asset in Andalusia is worth more than 700,000 euro and you are a non-resident, it will be, if it was in joint names, it would be 1,400,000 before you pay wealth tax. If you are a resident in Spain, then of the value of the house, we deduct the first 300,000. If it's in joint names, that would be 600,000 euro. And then you do have to declare worldwide assets. So anything above 700,000 euro, without counting the first 300,000 euro of your main home, then you'd have to pay wealth tax. But the wealth tax, people get scared when they hear wealth tax, but the percentages are really, really small. Okay, so before it scares anyone off, they should see what these percentages actually are.
So, Michael, in Andalusia, after the allowance of the main property, you've got as a resident or non-resident over 700,000 euros per person, correct?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, Pedro. What about Costa Blanca nowadays? Because we could always say nowadays we don't know what's going to be tomorrow. Over to you, Pedro.
Yeah, exactly. That's good, because I mean every year, about tax rules is changing mostly every year, I would say. And we speak with Michael because some years ago it was better Comunidad Valenciana tax rules about inheritance and wealth tax, and now it's in the other side probably. And about wealth tax in Valencia region, obviously what I agree with what Michael has said. I mean, if you are non-resident, you own a property or asset, and whatever is over 700,000 euros, then will be taxed. The taxes scale is from 0.20, 25 to 1.60 is around, if it's more, 1.6 million more or less. But the scale is and the percentage are low, but it's something to take into consideration. But when you are resident, and in this case resident in Valencia region, then obviously you need to declare the worldwide asset. I mean, when you are non-resident in Spain and you have a property in Spain, then just the property or assets in Spain, anything about the rest of the assets. But when you are resident in Spain, it's a worldwide asset, you need to declare your wealth tax. Permanent home is not included as a limit of 300,000 euros in Valencia region. Always individual person is 300,000 euros, which will not be taken into account on a base to be taxed. And apart from that, there is 500,000 euros. 500,000 euros that will not be taken into account. From there, that point will be on a scale that, as I said, will be from 0.25 to, well, could be until also a lot more, but like 3%. But when we're talking about a big like millionaires, but from 0.25 to 1.10 depends on as a normal scales. And
Pedro, as a resident,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
As a resident, you've got an allowance as well. I know there is a formula of allowances, correct?
Yeah.
Which is quite complex. The 60%, the 80% of allowance.
Yeah.
You are only resident.
Always is totally connected with absolutely connected with the income that you may get. I mean, if it's something that obviously when you have no income, that it will be able to be reduced. A big reduction on the amount to be paid into a maximum of 80%. So. And it's going to depend also on your income. It's going to depend on your income, and it's very complex to calculate that. Obviously, at the end, we need to have a simulation we do it regularly with clients, but this always is connected. It's connected because, I mean, it happens sometimes that people has a good asset, good it's a wealth, for assets, property, but there is no income at all, and so this will be reduced absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Let's move on then. You already bought a property, you either rent it out. I don't know if we did cover that obviously they need to include that as a resident on the renter form, okay? Because if you have properties that you're not renting it out, it's got what we call imputación de renta, which is like they tax you for having pretty much empty, okay? That as a resident, as a non-resident, you pay the sliding scale. Now that you already owe you have a property in Spain, what about VAT tax? Michael, in Andalusia, when will you pay VAT tax on a property? I think you mentioned before. And what about in Costa Blanca? Over to you, Michael.
Okay, well, if you buy a second-hand property, it's not subject to VAT. It'll be subject to transfer tax, which in Andalusia at the moment is a flat rate of 7%. If you buy a new property, in other words, either a property that's under construction or a property that's been sold by a builder that has never been sold before, then it'll be subject to VAT. And VAT across the board now on property is 10%. And when you pay VAT, you pay it in combination with document tax, which is charged in Andalusia at the moment at 1.2%.
Okay.
So basically, if you buy a second-hand property, the taxes on the purchase are 7%. If you buy a new property, it's 10% plus 1.2, so total 11.2.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Pedro, what about Costa Blanca?
Okay,
what about the VAT?
Yeah, VAT. Let me just going back to the transmission tax. We call it ITP when it's a resale. Obviously, we are used in order to speak about, well, is going to be in this case, Costa Blanca is going to be a 10% of amount of a transaction between seller and buyer. But now we have a reference value, and that has to be taken into account. Because sometimes, and it's happening, we have some transactions that the reference value is over the transaction and what that party has agreed. So it's something that in every single transaction right now in a resale needs to be checked, the reference value, because maybe it's going to be more than 10%, more than what the parties has agreed. Now imagine that a parties agree that it's going to be a purchase value of 300,000 euros, but then the reference value is 330. So will be some hundreds of euros there that needs to be checked. So I recommend sellers to check the reference value, just to check, because sometimes there is a mistake on the catastral value. It's over what it should be. So, and the catastral value is gonna have how to say, like, it's gonna be linked absolutely with the reference value. So, okay, having said that, with our new properties in Valencia region, is going to be 10% value tax plus 1.5% of a stamp tax. Value of the tax is paid as you pay to the developer. As you pay to the developer, you pay like a base, and is included and or added the value added tax. The stamp tax is paid after completion in 1 month. It's 1.5. 1 month after completion. Value added tax is paid during the process of the development of the construction and that. And then when it's a resale, in this case 10% in Valencia region in Costa Blanca, this 10% is paid after completion. Okay, Pedro,
let's move on now, talking about the subject of donation and inheritance tax. I know Michael is an ex-specialist in Andalusia, and he could tell us how does it work over there. Over to you, Michael.
Hi, Ignacio. Okay, I know it sounds very boring, but I love inheritance tax. You know, it's what I do all day long. So it sounds a bit sad when I say that. This is what I like to do. Okay, so so there's two within donation and inheritance tax. Andalusia for inheritance tax is a great place to be at the moment. As you say, rightly so, it could change in the future. You guys know that in the past it used to be the other way around. And I sent you many clients of mine that were down here in Marbella, and I recommended they buy up in Moreira, Heredia, because inheritance tax was better up there. Now the tables have turned. They could turn again. So at the moment, though, the deal is really good. In Andalusia, inheritance tax is really good for group 1 and 2 beneficiaries. In other words, spouses, children, and any other descendants in Spain, they're each entitled, if they're residents in Andalusia, doesn't matter where the inheritance is, they're entitled to €1 million each exempt. Okay, if they are non-residents in Spain, but the inheritance is in Andalusia, the beneficiaries, if their children, spouse, or their other descendants are entitled again to the €1 million exemption. The condition is that their pre-existing wealth can't be more than €1 million. But if their pre-existing wealth is more than €1 million, or they receive more than €1 million, it doesn't matter either, because we have another deduction in Andalusia available to them, which is the 99% deduction on their final tax bill. So if somebody inherits, I don't know, €2 million in Andalusia from their father, basically what happens is if their pre-existing wealth is less than €1 million, the first €1 million is exempt, and then on the other $1 million we apply the sliding scale. Once we apply, they get the final tax bill. We apply a deduction of 99%. So basically, if you inherit assets in Andalusia as a non-resident of Spain, or you inherit assets anywhere in Spain and you are a resident in Andalusia, if you inherit from spouse or from spouse or from your mother, father, or grandfather, basically inheritance tax is something that you don't need to worry about in Andalusia. It's a great deal. Now, regarding donation tax, I have to talk about this because we have seen horrendous situations regarding donation tax. People are saying, you know, as an estate planning strategy, I'm going to donate to my son now, blah, blah, blah. They go to a lawyer, the lawyer looks up the donation tax scale, and in Andalusia, to son, grandchild, or spouse, donation tax is almost exempt. You have a 99% deduction on the taxable bill for the beneficiary. Now, what people don't realize is the underlying capital gains tax. So if, for example, mum bought a villa in Marbella 20 years ago for €300,000, now it's worth €2 million. She donates it to her beloved son, donates, the son pays €1,000, €2,000 donation tax, close to nothing, and suddenly she receives a bill for 19% or up to 26% of the difference between €2 million and €300,000. And she thinks, wow, nobody told me about this. I've seen this situation quite a few times now. So it is something that happens. People need to realize that if you donate, there's an underlying capital gains tax. The beauty of inheritance, obviously, apart from the bad situation having to die to someone to inherit, but the beauty is that capital gains tax is not taxed, the capital gain. So, for example, if you inherit from your mum in Marbella, you inherit the villa worth €2 million, and she bought it for €300,000. You inherit it. There is a step up. The inheritance deed will say the value is €2 million. You will inherit it, pay close to nothing as far as inheritance tax. So you get this 99% deduction. So maybe you pay €2,000. But the full amount from €300,000 all up the way up to €2 million, that full gain is non-taxable if it's an inheritance. In Spain, we have a system which is you have a step up and that capital gains disappears. So there's a big advantage for inheriting versus receiving donation. And in our series of estate planning from hell, we've mentioned this a couple of times, of donations that have had a nasty surprise because of they're not counting on the capital gains tax.
Right. So we're talking pretty much, Michael, that nowadays this year is a tax heaven in Andalusia so far. So it's very good. In Andalusia,
I almost feel bad about rubbing it in, but at the moment, that's the case.
All right. Well, it's good to know. And the thing, Michael, is you never know, because as we said, these years like this, or next years like that. So, but it's good because today the people could benefit from what it is as the law is today. Tax change very often, and we're down to the.
It's also true. It's also true that Valencia region is not a bad region for inheritance tax. It's quite good as well. Andalusia, Madrid are probably the best at the moment. We on our traffic light for inheritance tax, we've got Andalusia, Madrid as the green, and we've got Valencia region as yellow, and then there are some really bad areas in Spain that are much worse off. And Valencia region is a good region also, and probably the tax is not enough. Sort of, if some people really like the Valencia region, other people like the Costa del Sol. They've got different things for different people. The Valencia region is not a bad region, but it's not the best.
It's not. We didn't reach the heaven yet, Michael, but we did reach that in the past.
You were there before, so now you've got to send the clients down from Heredia down to Marbella.
That's true. And actually, I remember in the old days having the other way around, and now you are in a good position. So lucky you now. So everybody should benefit from that. Pedro, how about where we are in Costa Blanca? How does it work? The inheritance and donation. Over to you.
Obviously, one of the things that Michael has said, and I absolutely agree, and we are saying many times about these gifts that may produce a lot of problems because of income they may get someone who donates and just brings another value. That value obviously is going to be an increase of income, and that income will go to the income tax declaration that should be paying a lot of taxes. So be aware about that. I mean, making a gift, do it correctly. And now I insist on that, the new value, the reference value, that should be done that way. And you cannot give and we're talking about properties, values on a property as you just want, because will be revised. Absolutely. And it's something that before doing anything, just check your reference value, check if it's in a gift, it's going to be paid taxes or no as a donation, and be aware about what may happen. In Valencia region, about inheritance, it has to be simple, and on property, you can reduce between benefits between children and spouses 150,000 euros as a limit, will be 95% of the value. And if it's the property where it's been habitual home. Apart from that, between spouse and children and parents will be another 100,000 euros. Having said that, in most of the situations that normal people has a house in Spain with its value, let's say more or less around 300,000-400,000 euros, owned by a couple, and they have some savings in the bank. And normally the amount to be paid as an inheritance is low. Normally it's low. Normally it's not too much. People is aware of thinking about, I thought it was going to be like 20% or like 30%. It's not like that. We're talking about sometimes about some hundreds of euros, and that's all. When the assets are more than that, high assets, then things change. Or when the second step, when both marriage or couples, both of them has lived, then things may change about the children. If it's just one children or different children, it's going to depend on that. But at the beginning, the first step normally is not too much. And whatever is the quota, in Andalusia, as I've been listening, is 99% reduction. In Valencia will be 50% reduction in most of the situation, general situation. When someone is disabled or the children are lower than 21 years, for example, the deductions are increased. Let's say instead of 100,000 euros, it's 156,000 euros. And instead of reducing the quota to be paid on taxes 50%, with these circumstances will be reduced 75%. Also, another thing is between companies, when someone is receiving like shares of companies, family companies, let's talk in general, family companies, the reduction is 99%, which is a lot. But this is particular and especially on family business. Okay, well, more or less it's like that, Ignacio.
Okay, right. I think we really did go very well on time. I don't know if we're missing or we could just jump on to questions. If Michael could choose the ones that really affect him, and Pedro could start looking into the one that really, because to be honest, we're being inundated with questions, you know.
Oh wow! Oh wow! Let me just check.
We're being inundated here. I don't want, if you want, we didn't cover here Murcia. Michael, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about Murcia that you've probably been dealing in Murcia. Do you want to comment something, and Pedro and Michael, anything? Because we wouldn't have the time, but just slightly, if you want to just mention something, because otherwise we will do another webinar about the Murcia tax. Do you want to mention anything, Michael, Pedro?
I don't really follow the Murcia region very much, so I prefer
just to leave it.
We should probably find another lawyer that specializes in Murcia for another. I know you're in the Valencia region, which is really big. I'm in the Andalucía region. There's so much work in these two regions that Murcia is like out of
what I heard, Michael, what I heard in Murcia at the moment, it was very, very bad after the credit crunch.
Yeah,
it was like Valencia. It was 99% off on everything, on inheritance tax and donation. Then it changed suddenly. It did not even have the allowance. It was like the non-resident, because I think we forgot, Michael, about non-resident inheritance tax. If we could just mention that. But in the Murcia region, and my understanding now is that they've got big allowance. I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly, but I think it's very similar now. Like Andalusia, what I heard, right? But Michael, before we even start into questions and answers, could you just tell us a little bit about what I just mentioned on the non-resident? Okay. Yeah, over to you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. This is
inheritance.
If people start Googling about this, they will go crazy, because the situation has changed 3 times in the last 5 years. Okay, so basically, let's start at the beginning. So in Spain, we have one general system of inheritance tax with very small exemptions, but then each region of Spain was entitled to create their own exemptions. Now, originally, up to a few years ago, you had to be a resident. The beneficiary had to be a resident in one of those regions to take advantage of the inheritance tax exemptions available. So during that period of time, non-resident beneficiaries had the worst deal because they couldn't claim any of the regional exemptions. And inheritance tax for all non-resident beneficiaries was always really high. Okay, this was changed in 2014 due to a sentence by the European Court of Justice that said that Spain could not discriminate non-residents who were residents of the EU who were inheriting in Spain. So it was then declared by this sentence that what Spain would have to do is let those non-residents of Spain that were resident in the EU to claim the exemptions of the region where the assets they were receiving were situated. And that sorted out the problems for them. Okay, so at that time, we went through 2 or 3 years where if you had an estate in Andalusia where there were 2 beneficiaries, one lived in London and one lived in Australia, the poor Australian brother would end up paying a lot more inheritance tax because he couldn't claim the exemptions, because he didn't fall under the protection of that sentence of the European Court of Justice that didn't allow the residents of the EU to be discriminated. Later on, there were some sentences by the Spanish Supreme Court, and it's a long, long story, a couple of years later, that said, then in reality, so on the back of that sentence of the European Court of Justice, Spain changed its laws and then established black on white that if you were a resident in the EU, you could claim the regional exemptions in Spain. So it left out in the cold those residents in Australia, Canada, and all these things. So then there were some sentences by the Spanish Supreme Court, which in a bit more convoluted way said that they should be entitled to those exemptions as well. That Spain for 2 or 3 years did not change their own internal laws. So, for example, in our case, we claim those exemptions for those non-residents, residents of third countries, even though the law in Spain didn't permit it, but the sentences sort of said that if you took it to court, you would win those cases. So we gave it a try, and we did quite a lot of self-assessment of inheritance tax on that basis, and we never received a claim back. Last year, though, Spain changed the law, obviously pushed a bit by all these English people. Suddenly Brexit has happened, so they're now third countries as well. That would mean that theoretically they would have to pay this high level of inheritance tax because they couldn't claim the regional exemption. Spain, last year, I think it was in July, they established a new law that allows, that basically says that under the new system, the regional exemptions can be claimed by beneficiaries that are resident in a region in Spain. They can claim those exemptions. And if you are a non-resident of any country now, regardless of whether it's an EU country or not, they can claim the exemptions available by the region where the majority of the assets they're inheriting are situated. So the conclusion that if I have an inheritance now in Andalusia, where I am, if my client, my beneficiary, is resident in Andalusia, he can claim the exemptions available in Andalusia, regardless of where in Spain the assets are situated. If he is a non-resident, resident in the UK, Australia, Germany, or wherever, if the majority of the assets that they are receiving are situated in Andalusia, I can claim the exemption rates available in Andalusia. This is probably very difficult for people to understand, first off, because it's not straightforward. But it's basically the only message really is that people that are inheriting in Spain or want to find out what the inheritance tax levels are, it's very difficult for them to understand the situation by looking on Google, because they're looking at 17 regions of Spain, each with their own different levels of exemptions, and then there's different ways of applying them. So they may look at a website from Valencia, they look at that and they see one level of exemptions. They look at the one from Andalusia, there's another level of exemptions, the Canary Islands, so they'll go crazy. So basically, in our case, we offer a Zoom consultation for anyone that wants to find out about their particular situation. They can call us, do a Zoom consultation, and we will explain what their situation is, regardless of whether it's somebody planning for the future when they pass away, or whether it's a beneficiary that wants a second opinion on what they've been told they're going to have to pay. There's one last thing I want to say about inheritance tax, is that in Spain now, the usual way of presentation is self-assessment. So it is perfectly possible for somebody to overpay. It's very easy to do. So you need to sort of get professional advice by a firm like yourselves up in the Valencia region, or by us down here in Andalusia. Okay,
Michael, thank you very much. Pedro, I don't know if you would like to add anything else to what Michael said, which was excellent. Would you like to mention that, or would you just jump into questions?
Let's go jump on questions. There are a lot of questions.
Michael,
I don't think we have time.
Both of you, for people who are running out of time, if you could put your direct email in the chat, because a lot of people might have very specific, as Michael said. Now, let me just advise you a little bit, and we are very proud that people do tax planning and consultation, which is always cheaper rather than falling into a problem, okay? I highly recommend you all to do it, because we've been covering in a very fast speech all the possible taxes you could pay taxing in Spain, and everything, as the panelist stated, is very specific, and you need to be cautious, okay? So always is important for you to appoint an independent lawyer and an accountant to advise you accordingly what to face, what to expect and what not to expect, what things you need to do by the book. Okay. Now, Pedro, would you like to pick the one before we even move on, or do you have anyone selected, Pedro?
Yes, really. Let's start. If anyone, yes, Ignacio, you can choose, or I can choose. By team, thank you, team, for writing us. English national, resident in Spain. My only residence global is in Valencia Comunidad. if I choose to sell my house and then rent a property, what is the tax burden on the sale income? I'm over 70 and tax resident in Spain. Well,
Pedro, how about to cover capital gain tax? Because we probably didn't cover capital gain tax as a resident, non-resident.
Well, let me answer, Tim. Yes, Tim, yes, well, congratulations, because you are over 65 years old and resident in Spain. So this is something that it will exempt any capital gain on just selling the property in Valencia region in this case, and I assume, I understand it's also in all Spain. And so there is something that even whenever you are more than 65 years old, then it's an exception. Okay, let's go to another question. I already answered by writing. I think it was to Susan. He said there is no Plusvalia tax when it's to be paid in restricted land. And okay, let's go to okay. I'm planning to buy. I'm buying a place in Spain to retire. Does anyone here wants to, or know of someone who wants to sell a property in those monasteries? Well, I'm not sure in Pusol. I'm sure probably whoever is listening to this webinar probably would like to help Loga in property in los monasterios, Pusol, outside Valencia, Pusol. Okay, let's go to another one. I read one, I think it was interesting. There are hundreds, Ignacio. There are.
Pedro, what about trusts? I know we cover in different webinars, but Joseph is saying here something about if the Spanish tax authority recognize living trust from other countries where I may be a trustee. I think, yeah, do you want to comment something here?
I bet, I mean, we have spoken about that sometimes, and there are some resolutions into the tax office about trust. The trust is not duly recognized under Spanish law. That is a must to be understand. Firstly, about the trust. Then there are some differences about trust. This is discretionary or not. There are some differences in order to state if someone is receiving some money when someone dies, or receiving some money when some gain is on the trust, or, I mean, it needs to be duly defined in order to demonstrate whenever it's going to be inspected where the money comes from and why it comes from a trust, and it is just that income or it is just that asset that it belongs to that person and not to a trust, which is a different person with other trustees or whoever is managing this trust. It's not recognized. I mean, there are we have different clients that has made us these kind of questions, and I suggest you be very accurate and very, very specific on that. I know Michael, he has had a lot of experience on trust also, but just I recommend everyone to check that because it's not duly recognized in Spain. So it needs to be checked perfectly what is done with a trust.
Okay, Michael, would you like to mention anything about the trust? Just very slow because we're running out of time.
Yeah, well, all I can say about trust is that in Spain, they cause a lot of problems. Trusts are things that exist in Australia, Canada, the United States, England, and that's about it. Everywhere else in the world, nobody understands what a trust is. And I will tell you from the point of view of what we do, which is inheritance, the biggest problems that we've come across with inheritance cases have all had to do with trusts set up in the UK. In other words, when we say, as you recommend as well, I know that when somebody buys a property in Spain, they need to make a Spanish will. Now, if they don't make a Spanish will and we're unlucky, and therefore we have to wind up the Spanish estate using the will from the UK, when the will in the UK mentions a trust, it always causes lots of problems when we can validate. I mean, really bad problems, not just that it delays things a lot and there's legal fees, etc. But sometimes it can be an inheritance tax nightmare, okay? Because, for example, when a trust is set up in the UK, in which the final beneficiary is the child, but somebody else is the trustee with faculties to buy, sell shares, buy houses, sell houses. When we bring it over to Spain, the taxman says to me, look, Michael, You say that the final beneficiary is the son, and he'd be entitled to his €1 million exemption, etc., etc. But all we can see is that what you're intending to do is put this property in the name of this trust that allows this other person that's not a family member to sell, to buy, to do this, do that. So at the end, we don't trust that this final beneficiary really is the final beneficiary, because these trustees have got faculty to do and undo regarding the property. And therefore, we're going to consider that it's a Group 4 beneficiary and you pay inheritance tax as if it was the stranger that was the beneficiary of the estate, because they've got de facto control over the estate. It causes tremendous problems. That's why, like you, we always recommend that you make a Spanish will to cover Spanish assets and not rely on an English will that may mention a trust, and it will cause lots of problems.
Okay, Michael, thank you very much. Very, very briefly, we didn't talk about company tax. Some of you might be having a company in the UK or abroad in the US, which starts and sets a company in Spain, and that company in Spain buys and does investments and start running a business. That's a different tax that you will start in Spain paying the first 2 years 15%, and after that the company tax will be 25%. From that you'll have a salary which will be taxed in Spain, a sliding scale about la renta, which I will send you now in the chat, is a sliding scale, and you could do tax planning. I think is very, very important, and Michael and Pedro, from the amount of questions we have here, which are, I will say, hundreds already now, about the tax, I think it is important if you could send your email in case they need to do a private consultation, because a lot of them might not need a specific about one thing, but might need about another one. Michael, could you please email and read out your website, please?
Okay, so I'm Michael Davies. We're situated in Andalucía on the Costa del Sol and Maria. That's Marbella, Malaga, etc., etc. We only basically nowadays deal with inheritance tax. So if you need help with inheritance, so that you need help with Spanish wills or probate or inheritance tax, or you've got an inheritance dispute, then we're the firm to call, and you can contact us on www.daviessolicitors.com.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Pedro, what about in Costa Blanca? They need to speak to you because we're running out of time.
I mean, I have already written my email, pedro@pellicerheredia.com. Obviously, I'm one of the lawyers in the firm of Pellicer and Heredia. The website is also pellicerheredia.com. And we cover all Costa Blanca. We have different offices, and we cover immigration, taxes, investment, inheritance, wills, and mainly locally in the Valencia region in Costa Blanca.
Okay, well, let me just thank you, both of you, for your time, which is very precious. You're given 1 hour of your time on this very busy day. I'm going to pass over to Juanfran, who's going to show around a little bit of Spain for 1 minute, what it's all about, the beauty of it. And we're going to join you back again, if you'll have time, in 15 days, sorry. I don't think we'll get 15 weeks, though. Michael, thank you very much. Pedro, thank you.
Thank you for you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
All right,
Bye.
and
Bye.
see you soon. Over to Juanfran, and see you soon.
Can't stop thinking about it. That hidden cove, just for you. That little hideaway in the mountains. Or that beautiful postcard town. Dreaming about enjoying the fresh air again. Feeling the sun on your skin. Exploring. Walking. Traveler, there is no path. Paths are made by walking. Never stop dreaming. Spain will wait.